The world spun around me like a broken carnival ride. One second I was walking on the mountain path, breathing in the fresh morning air, and the next second I was flying through empty space. The rocky cliff face rushed past me in a blur of brown and grey. My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. I was falling. Thomas's scream mixed with mine as we tumbled down together. His hand reached for me in the air, but we were both spinning too fast to grab hold of each other. The sound of our bodies hitting rocks echoed through the canyon like gunshots. Each bump sent sharp pain shooting through my arms and legs. When we finally hit the bottom with a sickening thud, everything went quiet except for the ringing in my ears. I lay there on my side, tasting blood in my mouth. My left arm felt like it was on fire and something warm was running down my face. Through my blurred vision, I could see Thomas a few feet away from me. He wasn't moving. Thomas. I tried to whisper, but my voice came out like a croak. My throat felt raw and scratchy. Above us, I heard voices, Margaret's voice. My mother-in-law was talking to someone, but I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard another voice that made my heart stop completely. Lucy, Thomas's 12-year-old sister, was up there with their mother. I tried to lift my head to look up at the cliff, but pain shot through my neck like lightning. The rocks beneath me were sharp and cold. I could feel them cutting into my skin through my torn hiking clothes. My right leg was twisted in a way that didn't feel right. "Mom, are they?" Lucy's voice drifted down from above. She sounded scared, but also something else. Something I couldn't understand. "Darling," Margaret's voice was calm, almost cheerful. "Don't look down there, it's better if you don't see." Better if she doesn't see. What did that mean? Why wasn't Margaret screaming for help? Why wasn't she calling 911? We had just fallen off a cliff and she was telling Lucy not to look. Thomas made a small groaning sound beside me. Relief flooded through my body. He was alive, but when I looked at him, his eyes were wide open, staring right at me. There was something urgent in his expression, something that made me freeze. His lips barely moved as he whispered so quietly I almost missed it. "Don't move, pretend to be dead, pretend to be dead." Why would he say that? My mind felt fuzzy from the fall, like I was thinking through thick fog. Nothing made sense. We needed help. We needed to call for help, but something in Thomas's eyes made me trust him. Even though every part of my body was screaming in pain, I forced myself to lie completely still. I closed my eyes and tried to make my breathing as shallow as possible. "Are we just going to leave them there?" Lucy asked from above. Her voice sounded different somehow. Not like Thomas's little sister who cried when she stepped on ants by accident. "Lucy, sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt everyone around them," Margaret said in that sweet, patient voice she used when she was talking to her daughter. "Your brother and his wife, they weren't thinking about what was best for our family." What was she talking about? What choices? I wanted to scream up at them to ask Margaret what she meant, but Thomas's warning kept echoing in my head. "Don't move. Pretend to be dead." My arm was throbbing so badly, I felt sick to my stomach. Blood was dripping from somewhere on my head and I could taste it on my lips. The rocks beneath me felt like they were getting colder and harder every second. "But Alina always makes those special cookies when I visit," Lucy said, and her voice cracked a little. "She helps me with my homework when Thomas is too busy." "I know, darling, and I'll do all those things for you now. We'll take care of each other just like we planned." Planned? They had planned something. My head was spinning, but not from the fall anymore. What did Margaret mean by just like we planned? And why was Lucy talking like she understood something about getting rid of her own brother? "Grandma, what if they're still?" Lucy started to say. "They're not, sweetheart. Trust me, it's better this way. Now we can have the life we talked about. The life they talked about." When did they talk about any life without Thomas and me? When did Margaret start planning something with her own daughter against her son? Ice-cold fear spread through my chest, mixing with the pain from my injuries. I heard their footsteps moving away from the edge of the cliff above us. Margaret was humming something under her breath, a lullaby she used to sing to Lucy when she was little. The sound of it now made my skin crawl. As their voices got farther and farther away, I opened my eyes just a crack. Thomas was still staring at me, his face pale and covered in dirt and blood. But his eyes were alert and angry in a way I had never seen before. When we couldn't hear Margaret and Lucy anymore, Thomas whispered again, so quietly I had to strain to hear him. "Alina, there's something I need to tell you. Something terrible." 3 days earlier, I was standing in our kitchen packing sandwiches for what I thought would be a wonderful family hiking trip. The morning sun streamed through our yellow curtains, and I hummed quietly while spreading peanut butter on bread. Everything felt so normal, so peaceful. "Alina, dear, are you sure you packed enough water bottles?" Margaret called from the living room. She had arrived early that morning with 2 large backpacks and an excited smile. "The mountain trails can be quite demanding." I smiled and called back, "I think we have plenty, but I'll grab a few more just in case." Margaret always worried about having enough supplies. It was one of the things I actually liked about my mother-in-law. She wanted to take care of everyone. Thomas walked into the kitchen yawning and running his hands through his messy hair. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. For the past few weeks he'd been tossing and turning at night, but whenever I asked him about it he just said work was stressing him out. "Morning, sleepyhead," I said, standing on my tiptoes to kiss his cheek. "Your mom's already here and ready to go. She brought enough gear for a week-long expedition." Thomas forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, she's thorough." From the living room we could hear Margaret talking to Lucy about something. Their voices were low, almost whispering. Lucy had driven down from her apartment in the city the night before, saying she was excited to spend time with family. She'd seemed different lately, more interested in asking questions about our house, our jobs, our daily routines. "I'm glad your sister decided to join us," I told Thomas while wrapping the sandwiches in plastic bags. "It feels like we hardly see her anymore since she moved out." Thomas nodded, but he was staring out the window with that distant look he'd been having lately. "Elena, can I ask you something?" Of course, he opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. "Never mind, it's nothing." Before I could ask what he meant, Margaret appeared in the kitchen doorway with Lucy right behind her. Margaret was beaming with enthusiasm. "I've been looking forward to this trip for months," Margaret announced. "Whisper Mountain has such beautiful trails and the views from the top are supposed to be breathtaking." Lucy nodded along. "Mom showed me pictures online. It looks amazing." She paused and looked directly at me. "Elena, have you ever been hiking on mountain cliffs before?" The question seemed odd. "Not really." "Why?" "Oh, just wondering. Some people get scared of heights." Lucy's smile looked different somehow. Sharper. Margaret clapped her hands together. "Well, we'll all take care of each other. That's what families do." She put her arm around Lucy's shoulders. "My daughter and I were just talking about how important family loyalty is." Thomas was quiet during the whole conversation. He kept glancing between his mother and sister like he was trying to figure something out. We loaded everything into Thomas's car, and I felt excited about the day ahead. It had been months since we'd all spent time together. Margaret sat in the passenger seat, giving Thomas directions, even though he'd already programmed the GPS. Lucy sat behind me, and I could feel her eyes on the back of my head. "Elena," Lucy said during the drive, "Thomas mentioned you guys have been talking about updating your life insurance." I turned around to look at her, surprised. "We have." Thomas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. We just discussed it briefly. "You know, being responsible adults." "That's very smart," Margaret said, nodding approvingly. "You never know what might happen. Accidents occur when people least expect them." Something about the way she said accidents made me feel uncomfortable, but I pushed the feeling away. Margaret was just being practical like always. When we reached the mountain parking area, Margaret insisted on taking photos of everyone. She had Thomas and me pose near the trail entrance, then took several pictures of just the two of us together. "These might be important later," she said, studying the photos on her camera screen. "Important for what?" I asked. "Oh, you know, memories." As we started hiking, Margaret walked ahead with Lucy. They kept their voices low, but occasionally I caught fragments of their conversation, words like inheritance and finally and after today. When I tried to move closer to hear better, Lucy would change the subject to something normal like the weather or the pretty flowers along the trail. Thomas fell into step beside me. His face was pale and he kept checking his phone even though we were supposed to be enjoying nature. "Are you okay?" I asked him. "You seem nervous." He looked at me for a long moment and I saw something that looked like fear in his eyes. "Elena, if something happens today, I want you to know that I love you more than anything." I laughed and bumped his shoulder with mine. "You're being dramatic. What could happen? We're just going for a nice family hike." But as we climbed higher up the mountain path with Margaret and Lucy whispering ahead of us, I started to notice things that didn't feel right. The way Lucy kept looking back at us with a strange expression. The way Margaret had insisted we take this specific trail. The way Thomas's hands were shaking. By the time we reached the narrow cliff path, something cold was settling in my stomach. But it was too late to turn back. The first night at our mountain cabin should have been relaxing. We'd rented a small wooden lodge near the base of Whisper Mountain, complete with a fireplace and a cozy kitchen. Margaret had insisted on booking it months in advance, saying she wanted everything to be perfect for our family time together. But as I unpacked our clothes in the tiny bedroom Thomas and I would share, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Through the thin walls, I could hear Margaret and Lucy talking in hushed voices in the next room. "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Lucy's voice was barely audible. "Keep your voice down," Margaret whispered back. "And no, I don't think he knows yet, but we can't wait much longer." I pressed my ear closer to the wall, my heart beating faster. What didn't Thomas know? What couldn't they wait for? "What about Elena?" Lucy asked. "What about her? She's never been anything but a problem anyway, always acting like she belongs in this family." The words hit me like a slap. Margaret had always been polite to me, even kind. But now she sounded like she genuinely disliked me. I heard footsteps approaching our door, so I quickly moved away from the wall and pretended to be organizing our suitcase. Thomas walked in, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Mom made these for us," he said, handing me one, but his hands were trembling slightly as he gave it to me. I took a sip and noticed it tasted slightly bitter, different from how I usually made hot chocolate. "This tastes strange." Thomas's eyes went wide with alarm. "Don't drink it," he whispered urgently, taking the cup from my hands. "What, why not?" Before he could answer, Margaret's cheerful voice called from the main room. "How's everyone settling in? I hope you're enjoying the hot chocolate, it's my special recipe." Thomas dumped both cups into the small bathroom sink and ran the water. His face was pale and serious. "Thomas, you're scaring me," I whispered. "What's going on?" He opened his mouth to say something, then shook his head. "I can't, not yet. Just please don't eat or drink anything unless I try it first." "Okay." The rest of the evening felt like walking through a strange dream. Margaret kept suggesting activities, card games, sharing old family stories, looking through photo albums she'd brought. But every activity seemed designed to keep Thomas and me separated from each other. When I tried to sit next to my husband, Margaret would ask me to help her in the kitchen. When Thomas tried to talk to me privately, Lucy would interrupt with questions about our house, our finances, our daily schedules. "Elena," Lucy said while we were washing dishes, "I've always wondered. Do you and Thomas have a joint bank account?" I paused, soap suds dripping from my hands. "Why would you ask that?" "Oh, just curious. I'm thinking about my own future, financial planning and all that." She smiled, but it didn't look genuine. "And your house, is it in both your names?" "Lucy, these are pretty personal questions. I'm sorry, I guess I'm just interested in how married couples handle money." She dried a plate slowly, like she was thinking about something. "Mom always says it's important to know where you stand financially." That night I lay awake listening to the sounds of the cabin settling around us. Thomas was pretending to sleep, but I could tell by his breathing that he was awake too. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside our room. I got up quietly and cracked the door open just enough to peek out. Margaret was standing in the kitchen talking on her cell phone in a low voice. "Yes, everything is going according to plan," she was saying. "Tomorrow morning we'll take the cliff trail like we discussed. Make sure you're ready on your end." Ready for what? Who was she talking to? I know it seems harsh, but they brought this on themselves. Thomas should have minded his own business instead of snooping through things that don't concern him. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "Lucy understands what needs to be done. She's a good daughter, unlike some people who married into this family." I felt sick to my stomach. They were planning something for tomorrow, something involving the cliff trail, and it had to do with Thomas snooping through something. Margaret continued talking. "The insurance money will solve all our problems. Lucy deserves a better life than what she has now, and this is the only way." She was quiet for a moment. "No, there won't be any evidence. It will look like a tragic accident. 2 young people who got too close to the edge and slipped." My whole body went cold. They were planning to kill us. Margaret and Lucy were planning to push Thomas and me off a cliff and make it look like an accident so they could collect insurance money. I crept back to bed, my hands shaking. Thomas was sitting up now, and in the dim moonlight I could see the worry on his face. "You heard," he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. "Elena, there are things about my family that I never told you, things I should have warned you about years ago." His voice was full of regret, but I never thought they would go this far. Outside our window, I could hear Margaret ending her phone call. Soon her footsteps moved back toward her room and the cabin became quiet again. But I knew none of us would really sleep that night. Back at the bottom of the cliff, Thomas and I lay perfectly still as the sound of Margaret and Lucy's footsteps finally faded away. My whole body itched from the fall and I could taste blood in my mouth, but I was desperate to understand what Thomas meant when he said he had something terrible to tell me. "Are they gone?" I whispered, barely moving my lips. Thomas lifted his head slightly and listened. The mountain was quiet except for the wind blowing through the trees above us. "I think so, but we need to stay quiet." I tried to shift my position to face him better, and sharp pain shot through my ribs. "Thomas, what did you mean? What's more terrible than what just happened to us?" His face was covered in dirt and blood from the fall, but his eyes were clear and full of pain that wasn't just from our injuries. "Elena, my father didn't deport like my mother always told everyone." I stared at him confused. "What do you mean? When Dad died 5 years ago, he left behind almost $2 million. Life insurance, savings, investments, even some property he owned that we never knew about." Thomas's voice was barely a whisper, but every word hit me like a hammer. $2 million. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But Margaret always said, your father left nothing but debts. She said that's why she had to sell the house and move into that small apartment. She lied about everything." Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, like remembering was painful. 3 months ago, I got a call from Dad's lawyer. Apparently, there was some paperwork that needed to be updated, and the lawyer couldn't reach Mom, so he called me instead. I tried to process what he was telling me. The lawyer called you directly. That's when I found out about the inheritance. Elena, according to Dad's will, the money was supposed to be split 3 ways between Mom, Lucy, and me. We should have each gotten around $600,000. My mind was spinning. Should have gotten. What happened to it? Thomas's expression grew darker. Mom has been stealing from Lucy and me for 5 years. She convinced the lawyer that she was managing everything for the family, that Lucy and I didn't need to know the details yet. She forged our signatures on documents. She moved money around. She's taken almost everything. I felt sick, and not just from my injuries. How much is left? Maybe $50,000 total. She spent the rest or hid it somewhere I can't find. Thomas tried to move closer to me, wincing as he did. But that's not the worst part. There's something worse than stealing $2 million from her own children. Elena, when I confronted her about it 2 weeks ago, she didn't deny it. She said she deserved that money more than Lucy and I did because she's the one who took care of Dad when he was sick. She said we were both ungrateful and that we'd just waste the money anyway. I remembered how strange Thomas had been acting for the past few weeks, the sleepless nights, the worried looks, the way he kept checking his phone. That's why you've been so upset lately. I told her I was going to expose everything. I said I'd go to the police and report the fraud. I had copies of all the documents the lawyer showed me. Thomas looked directly into my eyes. That's when she started talking about how accidents happen to people who cause trouble for their families. The pieces were starting to come together in my mind, creating a picture that made me feel cold all over. She's been planning this since you confronted her. I think so. And Elena, there's something else, something that makes this even more sick. Thomas's voice cracked with emotion. I found out yesterday that Mom took out a life insurance policy on both of us 6 months ago. A big one. What do you mean? She's been planning to kill us for months. The policy is for $1 million each. And guess who the beneficiary is? I already knew the answer, but hearing it would make it real. Margaret and Lucy together. They split everything 50-50 if we both die in an accident. Thomas's hands were shaking with anger now. My own mother and sister have been planning our murders so they can collect insurance money to replace what Mom already stole from us. I thought about all the questions Lucy had been asking about our house, our bank accounts, our schedules, about Margaret's strange behavior, the way she insisted on this particular hiking trip, the phone call I overheard last night. Lucy knows about the stolen inheritance money. I don't think she knew at first, but I'm pretty sure Mom told her recently, probably convinced her that it was somehow our fault that the money was gone. Thomas struggled to sit up a little, looking around at the rocks that surrounded us. Mom is very good at making people believe whatever she wants them to believe. Above us, a bird called out, breaking the silence. We both froze, listening for any sign that Margaret and Lucy might be coming back. Thomas, I whispered, how are we going to get out of here? How are we going to prove what they did? He reached into his jacket pocket with his good arm and pulled out his cell phone. The screen was cracked from the fall, but it was still working. Elena, I recorded everything. You recorded what? I whispered, staring at Thomas's cracked phone screen. Thomas winced as he shifted position to show me the device better. Everything, Elena. I've been recording conversations with Mom for the past 2 weeks. Ever since I found out about the stolen money, I knew she was planning something, but I never imagined it would be this extreme. My head was still pounding from the fall, but I forced myself to focus. What kind of conversations? Listen, he said, touching the screen carefully. The phone was damaged, but the audio still worked. Margaret's voice came through clearly. Thomas, you have no idea what you're messing with. That money was meant to take care of me in my old age. Your father would have wanted me to have it. Then Thomas's voice, Dad specifically wrote in his will that it should be split 3 ways. Mom, you stole from Lucy and me. I didn't steal anything. I invested it wisely. And if you keep pushing this issue, you might find yourself in a very difficult situation. Thomas stopped the recording and looked at me. That was from last Tuesday, but there's more, much worse. He scrolled through several audio files on his phone. This one is from yesterday morning. Before we left for the trip, I hid in the hallway and recorded Mom talking to Lucy in the kitchen. Margaret's voice filled the air again, but this time she sounded different, colder, more calculating. Lucy, sweetheart, I need you to understand something very important. Your brother has been trying to destroy our family. Lucy's voice responded, What do you mean, Mom? He's been accusing me of stealing money that rightfully belongs to us. He wants to have me arrested, Lucy. He wants to see your own mother in prison. That can't be true. I'm afraid it is. And Elena is encouraging him. She's the one who put these ideas in his head about family money. She's never really been part of this family anyway. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Even though I knew Margaret had been lying, hearing her manipulate Lucy so skillfully was horrifying. The recording continued, "But Mom, Thomas is my brother, he wouldn't really hurt you." "Oh, my dear girl, you're so innocent. Thomas has changed since he married Alina. She's made him greedy and suspicious. They're planning to take everything from us and leave us with nothing." "What can we do?" Margaret's voice became gentle, almost loving. "Well, there is a way we could solve all our problems. It would require some courage from both of us, but we could finally have the life we deserve." Thomas paused the recording and looked at me with pain in his eyes. "She spent hours convincing Lucy that we were the villains, that we were planning to steal from them and abandon them." "But that's all lies," I said, though my voice came out weak and shaky. "I know that and you know that, but Lucy has always trusted Mom completely, and Mom is very good at sounding believable." Thomas played another section. "The insurance policies I took out on Thomas and Alina will provide for us if something happens to them. It would be tragic, of course, but at least we'd be financially secure." Lucy's voice sounded uncertain. "Insurance policies. When did you do that?" "A few months ago. I had a feeling that Thomas might do something reckless. Maybe try to leave the country with Alina and all the money. The policies are just protection for us." "Mom, that sounds kind of what, dear? Never mind." "I trust you." Thomas stopped the recording again. His hands were shaking. "Alina, do you understand what she did? She convinced Lucy that we were going to run away and steal money that doesn't even exist anymore because Mom already took it all." I tried to sit up straighter, but pain shot through my back. Lucy actually believed her. Lucy has been living paycheck to paycheck, working 2 part-time jobs just to afford her tiny apartment. When Mom told her there was family money that we were trying to steal and that the insurance would give them enough to live comfortably forever, Thomas's voice trailed off. "She saw it as her only chance at a better life." "Exactly. And Mom made sure Lucy understood that it had to look like an accident. No one could ever suspect that it was intentional." I thought about Lucy's strange questions over the past day, asking about our insurance, our bank accounts, whether I'd ever been hiking on cliffs before. She'd been gathering information, making sure the plan would work. "Thomas, play the rest." The final recording was the most chilling. It was Margaret's voice, but she was talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, I understand the risks, but Lucy is completely committed now. She believes her brother and his wife are trying to destroy our family." There was a pause. "The trail has several spots where accidents could happen naturally. We've studied the area carefully." Another pause. "No, Lucy won't change her mind. I've made sure she understands that this is the only way to save our family. She's a good daughter. She'll do what needs to be done." Thomas turned off the phone. "Alina, my own sister, helped plan our murder because she thought we were the bad guys." In the distance, we could hear voices getting closer. Margaret and Lucy were coming back. "They're coming back," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. The voices were getting louder. Margaret's calm tone mixed with Lucy's higher pitch as they made their way down the mountain trail toward where we lay broken at the bottom of the cliff. Thomas quickly shoved his phone deep into his jacket pocket and grabbed my hand. "We have to move now." "I don't think I can," I said, trying to stand up. My left leg felt wrong and sharp pain shot through my ribs with every breath. "Something's broken." "Alina, listen to me." Thomas's voice was urgent but quiet. "If they find us alive, they'll finish what they started. We have to get out of here." He was right. If Margaret and Lucy discovered we'd survived the fall, they wouldn't leave anything to chance this time. They'd make sure we were actually dead before they left. Thomas struggled to his feet, his right arm hanging awkwardly at his side. Blood was still trickling from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were focused and determined. "Can you put any weight on that leg?" I tested it carefully. Pain flared up from my ankle, but I could stand if I leaned on Thomas. "I think so, but how are we supposed to climb back up a cliff? Not the same way we came down." Thomas looked around at the rocky terrain surrounding us. "There's got to be another path. This canyon has to connect to something." The voices were getting closer. We could make out words now. "Mom, what if someone saw us?" Lucy sounded worried. "No one saw anything, dear. We were just a family enjoying a hike together when a terrible accident happened." Margaret's voice was steady, almost cheerful. "We'll tell everyone how we tried to save them, how we called for help immediately." My stomach turned. She was already practicing her story, preparing to play the grieving mother-in-law who'd lost her beloved son and daughter-in-law in a tragic hiking accident. Thomas and I started moving as quietly as we could, staying close to the cliff wall. Every step sent waves of pain through my body, but fear kept me going. We had to find a way out before they reached the spot where we'd landed. "Look," Thomas whispered, pointing ahead of us. About 50 yards away, there was a narrow path carved into the rock face, probably made by animals or erosion over time. It looked steep and dangerous, but it appeared to lead back up toward the main trail. We moved as quickly as we could, but I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out every time my injured leg hit the ground. Behind us, Margaret and Lucy's voices were getting clearer. "I can see where they landed," Lucy said, and her voice sounded strange. "Not sad but not happy either. Should we check to make sure?" "Of course we should check, darling. We need to be able to tell the rescue workers exactly what we found." Margaret sounded like she was enjoying this. "Don't worry. After today, all our problems will be solved." Thomas and I reached the narrow path just as I heard footsteps on the rocky ground where we'd been lying moments before. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd be able to hear it. The path up the cliff was barely wide enough for one person. Thomas went first, testing each step to make sure it would hold our weight. I followed, pressing my back against the rock wall and trying not to look down at the drop below us. "That's strange." Lucy's voice carried up from the bottom of the canyon. "Mom, there's blood here, but I don't see any bodies." My blood went cold. We'd left a trail. "What do you mean?" Margaret's voice had lost its cheerful tone. "I mean there's blood on these rocks, but Thomas and Elena aren't here." There was a long pause. Then Margaret spoke again, and this time her voice was sharp and angry. "They survived the fall. How is that possible?" "It doesn't matter how it's possible. What matters is that they're somewhere nearby, probably injured and trying to get help." Margaret's voice was getting louder, like she was looking around as she talked. "We have to find them before they reach the main trail." Thomas and I were about halfway up the narrow path when we heard Lucy shout, "Mom, I can see scuff marks on the rocks over here. I think they went this way." "Move faster," Thomas whispered to me, but I was already pushing myself as hard as I could. The path was getting steeper and my injured leg was starting to give out. Below us, we could hear Margaret and Lucy starting to climb the same path we were on. Margaret was giving orders. "Lucy, call that number I gave you. Tell them we have a problem and need backup." "Backup? Who else was involved in this?" "Tell them the targets are still mobile and we need immediate assistance at our location." Margaret continued, "We weren't just running from Thomas's mother and sister. There were other people involved in this plan. People who were probably on their way to help finish what Margaret and Lucy had started." As we climbed higher, Thomas suddenly stopped and turned to look at me. His face was pale with pain and exhaustion. But there was something else in his expression, determination mixed with fear. "Elena, when we get to the top, we run, we don't stop, we don't look back, and we don't trust anyone we meet on these trails." We reached the top of the cliff path just as the sun was beginning to set. My legs were shaking from exhaustion and pain, and Thomas's face was grey with blood loss, but we were alive behind us. We could still hear Margaret and Lucy climbing, their voices echoing off the rocks. "The parking lot," Thomas gasped, pointing through the trees, "if we can reach the car." But as we stumbled toward the trail that led back to where we'd parked that morning, I saw something that made my heart sink. Two men in hiking clothes were walking toward us from the direction of the parking area. They looked normal enough, but something about the way they moved, purposeful, searching, made me grab Thomas's arm. "Those aren't regular hikers," I whispered. Thomas followed my gaze and his expression darkened. "Margaret's back up." We ducked behind a large boulder just as one of the men spoke into a radio. "We're at the North Trail intersection. No sign of the targets yet, but we'll keep looking." Targets? They were talking about us like we were animals to be hunted. "What do we do?" I asked Thomas. We were trapped between Margaret and Lucy coming up from below and these two men blocking our path to the parking lot. Thomas was quiet for a moment thinking. Then he pulled out his damaged phone. "Elena, I'm going to try something, but I need you to trust me completely." Before I could ask what he meant, he stood up from behind the boulder and walked directly toward the two men with his hands raised. "Help!" he shouted loud enough for his voice to carry across the mountain. "Please help us, there's been a terrible accident." The two men looked surprised to see him, but they walked over quickly. "Sir, are you injured? We heard there might be hikers in distress." "Yes, my wife and I fell down a cliff, were badly hurt." Thomas was acting perfectly. He sounded panicked and desperate, just like any accident victim would. "My mother and sister are still down there looking for us. We managed to climb back up, but we need to get to a hospital." One of the men spoke into his radio. "We found them. They're alive and mobile. What are your orders?" That's when I understood what Thomas was doing. He was making them reveal themselves while pretending to be helpless victims. The man on the radio listened to whatever response he got, then looked at his partner and nodded. They both reached into their jackets. "Actually, sir," the first man said, his voice now cold and professional, "I'm afraid you're not going to make it to any hospital." But Thomas was ready. As soon as they moved for their weapons, he pressed something on his phone and shouted, "Elena." Now I stood up from behind the boulder with Thomas's phone held high, the screen facing the men. "Smile for the camera, gentlemen. This is all being live streamed to the police." It was a lie. The phone was too damaged for any kind of live stream, but the men didn't know that. They hesitated, unsure whether to risk being filmed committing murder. That moment of hesitation was all we needed. Thomas grabbed my hand and we ran toward the trees. crashing through branches and underbrush as fast as our injured bodies could carry us. Behind us, we heard the men arguing about what to do and then the sound of them chasing after us. But we knew these trails better than they did. We'd studied the map before our hike that morning. We made it to a service road just as a park ranger's truck came around the bend. Thomas waved frantically, and the ranger stopped immediately when he saw our bloody torn clothes. "What happened to you folks?" "Someone just tried to kill us," I said, gasping for breath. "Please, we need to call the police right now." The ranger looked skeptical until he saw the two men emerge from the trees behind us, still carrying weapons. Then his expression changed completely. He grabbed his radio and called for immediate backup while helping us into his truck. 20 minutes later, the mountainside was swarming with police cars and ambulances. Margaret and Lucy were arrested as they tried to climb back up the cliff path, both of them acting shocked and innocent until the police played Thomas's recordings. I watched from the back of an ambulance as they put handcuffs on Lucy. She looked so small and confused, nothing like the person who had helped push us off a cliff just hours earlier. When she saw me looking at her, she started crying. "I'm sorry, Alina," she called out as the police led her away. "Mom said you were going to hurt our family. She said it was the only way." Margaret, on the other hand, showed no emotion at all. Even when confronted with the evidence, she just stared straight ahead like she was already planning her defense. The two men were caught trying to leave the park. It turned out they were hired criminals Margaret had contacted through some dark connections from her past. Connections Thomas never knew his mother had. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom listening to the judge sentence Margaret to life in prison for attempted murder and fraud. Lucy received 15 years with the possibility of parole in 10. The judge acknowledged that she had been manipulated, but said she was still responsible for her actions. Thomas and I survived, but something in us died on that mountain. We moved away from the city where we'd built our life together, changed our names, and tried to start over. But every time we meet new people and they ask about our families, we have to decide how much of the truth to tell. The stolen inheritance money was never recovered. Margaret had hidden it so well that even the FBI couldn't find it all, but we didn't need it anymore. We had something more valuable. We had survived the people who were supposed to love us most, and we had each other. Sometimes late at night, I still dream about falling off that cliff. But now, I know that the real fall wasn't the physical one. The real fall was learning that family can be the most dangerous thing of all.